Welcome, gentle listener, I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and war gear of the Warhammer 40k setting. The grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace, there is only time for war. Now do please consider liking the video and subscribing, and consider turning on the notification bell. And do check the pinned comment or the video description for links to other videos, channels, and potential bargains, coming soon. That said, today, we shall be discussing the newest form of power armor worn by the Adeptus Astartes, the Angels of Death, the Space Marines. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of the lore, allow me to give you a wee tale as a flavor piece to get you in the mood and set the scene. Story continued from the Angel and the General playlist. From the board library. Tradition. Into the enemy's dark heart we pierce. The Bloodspears. What should have been a day of joy, a moment of exuberant but solemn grandeur, had turned to horror. Chapter Master Damarian Damon slowly lifted his left hand and calmly wiped the sizzling spittle from his face. The shock had silenced the room, but now it burst into thunderous clamour, as one, the score of Marines to his rear, now bellowed with fury and took one step forward, drawing their swords, combat knives, power mauls, and flicking them to life. Rage. Like lightning, the chapter master swung on his own men, raising both his hands like claws and baring his fangs at them, letting out his own hissing growl. Every last Primaris stepped back and snapped to attention. They knew his berserker power. He had led them to countless victories working in tandem with General Mastima. This was the first time any of them had seen him display even a single iota of wrath outside of the furore of battle. They noted the black rimming around his pupils. Someone was going to die. The Bloodspears were a strange founding, formed from the Grey Shields due to a 1-in-a-million missive penned by an unknown and unheralded regional Astra Militarum general. He honoured a chapter that had been exterminated by greenskins. Yet in death, they had shown such virtue, such sacrifice and honour, that it was deemed that their chapter should be resurrected. And they found one, just one, Marine left of that line. Damarian Damon, who had been so bitterly injured, he had been interred in a dreadnought. Yet, he was offered the choice and crossed the Rubicon Primaris. And it was this last scion of the Bloodspears who had been given their command, had been elevated to chapter master. Their old chapter monastery was even now still in the throes of being reconsecrated and rebuilt. So little of their heraldry, banners, artifacts, and honour had remained the advent of the rapacious orcs. It was truly a chapter reborn, and it was still growing into its identity. The Primaris Marines were strong and courageous, true sons of Sanguinius, yet they knew so little of their pedigree, and Damarian Damon was not a voluminous rank. He knew so few of the inner traditions that made the Bloodspears who they were. A new crusade had been called, with Damarian Damon at its fore, he and the General, who had helped bring them back from the annals of history. So, when their deep-ranging scout forces stumbled upon a stasis envelope, they inspected it immediately. Beyond all hope, within it, was a strike cruiser of the original Bloodspears chapter. Idents all checked out. The Mechanicus took weeks of readings and study, prodding and probing, before they finally collapsed the field and freed the cruiser within. The initial contacts had been strained, as the cruiser, vengeance most dire, had been captured during the middle of a battle. Confusion and dislocation in time were difficult for both parties. But eventually, the Vengeance crew were brought to see what had transpired, and informed that they had been in this state for over 1,000 years. The Vengeance had 32 Marines on it, and a core squad of Vanguard veterans. Of all that could be found, all that could have helped the chapter, it was a find worthy of celebration. For the veterans of the first would know all: the heritage, the pedigree, the secret rites of the chapter. Damari and Damon had explained what had happened, the destruction of their chapter, and how they had been reinforced. He gave over pict feeds and other proofs for them to watch and dissect, to allay their worries before he arrived. But he did not state by whom this was done. That shock would take time to compromise, and would make him seem like a fanciful liar. It could wait. Yet, when Damari and Damon came across by Storm Raven and landed with a score of his battle brothers, the moment of joy had turned to horror. The survivors who greeted them, Vanguard veterans at their center, were shocked to the core. Of course they had noted the different armor marks in conversation, but had not seen the Marines in scale. When the gangplank went down and the Primaris Marines strode out, the new Bloodspears were a jolt to the system, and the Firstborn dropped into a combat stance immediately. Alone, Chapter Master Damon walked forward with arms wide, palms upward in a sign of greeting. A single Marine, Veteran Sergeant Corsair, strode out to meet him. But when Corsair also took off his helmet, the sneer was unmistakable. Damon towered over him in his Gravis armor against Corsair's Mark 7, but this made no difference whatsoever. In fact, it may have been the cause of the contempt. "Welcome back to the battle, brothers," began Damon carefully. Through thinned eyes, Corsair looked the chapter master up and down, then barked. "What rank were you when it happened?" "It matters not. I am the chapter master," stated Damon calmly. "Spoken like a ranker. I've seen your ways of war, viewed everything you have sent." Damon's arms went down to his sides. He did not flinch. Corsair continued, but with bile. "All I see is strangers wearing my heraldry. You have not earned it. You have no right to it. You dishonor me, my men, and our true chapter." Damon blinked once, then responded in a level, neutral tone. "Veteran, we need you. I need you. To show us the old ways, to resurrect our deep traditions. But I will not have you disrespect me or my men. We are sons of Sanguinius, and by your leave or no, we are Bloodspears." And that is when it happened. The veteran hawked dramatically and spat right into the face of the towering Damari and Damon. "For leadership of this chapter, I challenge you." Hence the Primaris Marines' reaction, and Damari and Damon's growl at his own men, bringing them back into order. He then turned back to the veteran and nodded. The veteran was technically the highest-ranking Bloodspear. He had every right to challenge. Yet Damon had been given his mandate by the Lord Commander himself, the Avenging Sun, the Primarch amongst us, Rabute Gilliman. He could argue his point quite clearly. Yet if he did not do this, could he ever gain the fealty of these most important brothers, those who knew the soul of the Bloodspears? He made the decision instantly. "I, Damari and Damon, Chapter Master of the Bloodspears, accept your challenge." Corsair stepped back 5 paces, as the veterans and other firstborn now made a semicircle around him. He stretched out his right hand, and a power spear was thrown to him. He did not even look at it, but snatched it out of the air and twirled and twisted it in his hands like a seasoned avatar of war. Daemon went to draw his sword, but had a vague memory of seeing one lecture on this subject. He sighed deeply to himself, and then opened his hand towards the other veterans across from him. Not one of his own men, nor he, carried a spear. And he now knew the depths of their disdain, as a veteran slid a spear onto the floor and kicked it to him. It clattered across, and Damarian bent down, which looked ungainly in his massive gravis armor. To the firstborn, he must have looked almost like an Ogrin. Yet, when he rose, he took the spear and did not exert one sweep or twirl. He merely stood stock still. The Primaris Marines then mimicked the firstborn and formed a semicircle to Damarian Daemon's rear, but it was certain that the circle was not complete. No firstborn or Primaris wished to venture too close to the other, not under the circumstances. Did they think the Primaris were chaos-tainted? Did they not believe them imperial servants? With an entire fleet made up of Militarum de Mechanicus, Sisters of the Orders, did they still question their loyalties? Or did they simply sneer at those they did not trust, did not believe had replaced them? Was this simple envy? None had the time to complete this train of thought, as Corsair did not even bow before launching himself towards Damarian Daemon. The veteran was swift and sure, his lunges coming forward like a tidal wave. Daemon was faster, stronger, bigger, yet he was pressed back instantly. The spear tip of the veteran near striking his face a dozen times, clattering off his gravis armor more than a score. Each one leaving a chip, each one diminishing Daemon in the eyes of all present. The chapter master struck back as fast as he could, but the difference in skill and experience with the spear was embarrassing. The two closed even further, and the smaller veteran whirled in such ways that none had seen before. His blade was everywhere. Then, as Daemon evaded the last direct strike towards his eyes, the bottom of the spear haft smashed against his chin, raising his head, so the veteran then struck across his neck. A thin line of blood trickled down Daemon's neck and into his armor. If it had been an inch deeper, he would be incapacitated, even with all his healing properties. The firstborns all grunted as Corsair threw his spear to another veteran and drew his blade and flicked it into life, power coruscating down its length. First blood had been his. Damarian Daemon planted the spear tip into the deck and drew out his own long power sword. Corsair leapt forward, bringing his sword down for a killing blow, but was met by the blade of Daemon, who deflected it with such power that the veteran was forced back 5 paces. Corsair sneered at Daemon, who merely looked at him blankly. Daemon then paced towards him, seeming to hunt the smaller marine. The engagement continued, and the two now struck and parried, lunged and backhanded with such speed that few could make them out, even amongst the marines present. Corsair should, by rights, have cut off Daemon's left leg, but the chapter master knew his war plate, angled it perfectly to deflect the blow that should have shorn through it. If it were errant pattern, he would have lost that leg. Corsair should have been faster. He was in the smaller, lither armor, yet he was not Primaris, and the equality of reactions was staggering. Even in this gargantuan armor, the chapter master was matching his every stroke, until the last. The power sword of Corsair penetrated the guard of Daemon and nicked his face again above the right eye, the crackling energy field along its length cauterizing the wound as it was made, evaporating his eyebrow. The stench filled the room, and another grunt went up from the firstborn, a few punching the air. The Primaris looked on in despair. None knew what would happen now. None but Daemon, and so, of course, did Corsair. The veteran then sheathed his blade, as did Damarian Daemon. Corsair panted now, not in fatigue, but out of pure rage, as he glowered at the chapter master and spat. "You have none of our skills, chapter master. Now, let us see if you have any of the angel's rage." With the last word, he tore towards Damarian Daemon. The Primaris as one took one step back at this bark. It was not to control themselves. It was certainly not out of fear. They did so to give their master the room he needed for his demonstration. Corsair bore his fangs and bellowed as he came, only to find himself suddenly wide-eyed. Damarian Daemon showed his fangs and powered towards the veteran. The two crashing into one another, boots and fists raking fingers across faces, headbutting now erupting to such a degree the blood was filling the air. But little of it was the chapter master's. His armour protected him from every last body and limb shot Corsair smashed out. They bounced off like the slap of a toddler. Daemon then retorted with a fury few had witnessed. His repeated blows cracked the breastplate of the veteran. His seemingly slow kick smashed the boot protection of Corsair. Daemon then struck him hard in the chest, breaking the warplate. But as Corsair moved backwards, the chapter master snatched at him, the reach difference making it an easy task to gain purchase. Then the enhanced strength of the Primaris Marine in Gravis armour launched the firstborn into the air. Daemon stepped forward and waited for Corsair to fall. Using a devastating two-handing haymaker on him, Corsair was shot back into his own men, bowling 3 of them over. The Bloodspears were not ultramarines. They were not like their cousins on Baal. Theirs was the fury, and the chapter master knew it. So he had to prove that he was no construct of another's mind. He was a son of Sanguinius, and he was a Bloodspear. Daemon did not tarry, gave no quarter, as he then charged into them as they rose. But he did not contend just with Corsair, who could barely rise. The chapter master slammed into Corsair, launching him towards a wall that shattered with his strike. The veterans who stood up now brawled with him as well, and he dispatched them all one after another. A huge kick into the chest of one, a bear hug that broke another. Daemon did not howl, did not curse, but did not stop. For their part, the veterans were close to the tipping point. Seeing their lord defeated so easily by a man wearing their livery, it was to be expected. They worked on rage alone. But it was not enough. It could never match that of Damarian Daemon, the last survivor of his chapter, he who had witnessed the blood his brethren exterminated. He carried that pain and rage into this battle, and unleashed it on his firstborn brothers. Daemon took on every last one of the half-dozen firstborn who moved against him. He did not cripple or kill, but he dealt out the most vicious beatdown the Primaris Marines had ever witnessed. Finally, when the last enraged veteran had been slammed across the face a half-dozen times and fallen backwards unconscious, the firstborn as one knelt. Damarian Daemon then purposefully walked to Corsair and offered his hand. Spitting blood, the veteran took it and let himself be brought back to his feet. Looking down on Corsair, the calm voice of the chapter master intoned, "We are different, but we are also not. We still have Sanguinius's blood running through our veins, his voice in our ears, in our very hearts. And, as I have said, we need you, brothers. I need you. Join us. Lead with me. Or return to Baal." The warrior nodded. Through blooded teeth and broken nose he stated, "When I saw you, I did not believe. But now, Chapter Master Damarian Daemon, you have proven yourself worthy. I see you have no guard. Is there still armor?" Daemon said, "Aye, there is, the gold." Again Corsair nodded. "Then we shall wear it. We shall protect you. and we shall teach. And soon, no longer just in name, you shall all be true Bloodspears. Mark 10 Power Armour, the newest and most potent of all forms of power armour worn by the Space Marines. There is little like it in the entire armories of the Imperium. Or one may point to the Ordermite armour of the Adeptus Custodes, the 10,000 bodyguard of the Emperor, or even the Aegis armour of the Grey Knights, and you would be perfectly within your rights to do so, or even the bespoke Artificer armour forged so long ago. For there is no real comparison betwixt these intensely rare and potent suits of warplate, as the Marines call it, and that of the Primaris. But this leaves out the fundamental change that has occurred. Yes, each mark of power armour has been an attempt to improve on this legendary icon of the Imperium. For few wear such armour, and none that do are to be taken lightly. Yet, the development of the armours has been a strange and incredibly important one. I have videos on every mark from Thunder Armour all the way to the last of the Firstborn variants, the 7th and 8th. Yet nearly all of them were developed in a different era, an age when the Emperor walked amongst his own people, where the imperial truth was the cornerstone of humanity, when the factorums of the fledgling Imperium were as numerous as the stars, and each attempted to outdo the other in not only artifice and skill, but also in progress. The marks of power armour were developed not only due to the changing needs of the Space Marines as the Crusade developed, but also due to STCs, or standard template constructs, being found. Those blueprints left by the enlightened humanity of the age of technology. Hence, the information therein contained was seen as good and pure. It was integrated into the databanks of the Mechanicum and others as soon as possible, and the discovery of these blueprints was a driving goal of the entire Great Crusade, as much as the domination of the galaxy and the freeing of the beleaguered, beaten and bloody remains of the colonies that once made up the human Stellar Confederation. The Thunder Armour was developed for the Unification Wars, it is true, but all other marks were designed for the Astartes, the Space Marines. The 2nd all the way to the 7th patterns were all designed and constructed during the mere 200 years odd of the Great Crusade. Even the Mark 8 armour was not much more than a tinkering around the edges of the 7th, the cables being covered in armoured plate, the gorget that protected the neck of the Marine. Yet even these limited changes made the Mark 8 uncommon amongst the chapters, as the Forge Worlds did not wish to change their production lines, and the bureaucracy prevented mass production for centuries. To a very real extent, power armour was a creation of the Dark Age of technology, as seen by its use by multiple independent pocket empires and colonies that were brought into imperial compliance. It was just honed and altered for the needs of the post-human Space Marines, as their ways of war altered and the technologies were improved. Even so, the Mark 6 was one of the most advanced, due to the level of scanners and support information possible in the notorious Beaky Helm, something that had to be downgraded when the Aquila armour and later Errant armour went with the Darth Vader look. Yet again, this was due to the armours not really having the space at the front of the nose of a womble to be placed there, due to the new gorget, etc. But now, the Mark 10 armours have arrived. And I say armours, as you consider that there are actually 4 distinct versions of this warplate that do very different jobs. Specific and potent, they are bespoke for the role the Marine will perform. And all are due not to a new STC being uncovered, nor an old version being unearthed somewhere. They are actually 100% new. Now the grumble on the grapevine is that Belisarius Cawl and his entourage have been working on the new pattern of armour for over 100 centuries. That due to the sheer passage of time, They have been able to design and then mass-produce a set of armor that is distinctly different and superior to all previous versions. The Mark X. Not only that, but newer and more deadly weapons to supplement the new mark of armor and the new type of marine that dons it. The Primaris Marines. So we have a new army of Space Marines, just in the nick of time. Gilliman wakes up from his nap, just as the alarm bells of the Necrons have chimed. Perhaps their klaxon also did the same for the sleeping beauty that is the Lion. I'm sure the universal nap time concluding so close together is simply a coincidence. Not someone saying, "Crumbs, that's a good idea. Let's do it again and again and again and again." But I digress. So let us get to the specifics of the matter at hand. The Mark X armor is designed to be modular in a way that other marks could not even dream of being. Yes, most marks can be interchanged at some level, proven in the hodgepodge that was the Mark V Heresy armor. Yet the Mark X is specifically forged to be interchangeable, and for elements to be used to give different effects and strengths to support the new Marines in their new units. Let's not even get onto the naming conventions used. Just assume I could rant on about that for longer than most filibusters, and by quite some margin, I can assure you. There are 4 distinct configurations of the Mark X, being the Tacticus, the Gravis, the Phobos, and the Omnis. The Tacticus is as close to a standard set of warplate as any Marine could yearn for. These are equipped by the Intercessors, Assault Intercessors, Desolators, Infernus, Hellblasters, Blade Guard and Stern Guard veterans. It is worn by the officers as well, including lieutenants, captains, apothecaries, ancients, chaplains, tech marines, and line librarians that lead the squads named above. The Tacticus armor is, of course, far larger than the previous marks, as it is designed to house the lofty and girthy frames of the new Primaris Marine. Its helmet contains sensors every bit as impressive as the Mark 6 to 8, and its pauldrons contain another level of armor over any previous. It has stim ports for the direct drugging of the wearer, improved venting of heat on the backpack, and a new body glove undersuit designed for the comfort of the wearer as well as to give yet another level of protection. The plastic mech belt and ablative tacit plates give increased protection while affording the Marine even greater agility and maneuverability over even the Mark 6. With the better fiber bundles that further augment the already stronger Primaris Marines, there is a significant improvement in not only protection, speed and sensors, but also in sheer bully boy strength and overall power. A fine set of warplate indeed. The next set is the Phobos configuration. It is fast, nimble, offering less protection than the standard Tacticus, but where it lacks in power, it makes up for in stealth and sound suppression. The Phobos armor is worn by the quick and the dead of the Vanguard formations, the Reavers, Incursors, Infiltrators, Eliminators, and the officers who lead them being usually captains, lieutenants, and librarians only. Now some may say, but Uncle Baldermort, is there not Reaver armor? Alas, as far as I can see, this is merely Phobos armor with a grav chute attached to the backpack. Now I make no bones about the fact that I don't really gel with sneaky beaky Marines of any stripe, as it goes against the grain for an old ghoul like myself. It's why the earlier editions had such garish pageantry and coloration in their Space Marine chapter colours. I cannot presently find the exact quote, and it generally goes from the Emperor like this: "My enemies shall see them coming, and they will know that they will die." Anywho, the next configuration is probably my favourite, the Gravis armor. If a tactical suit had a baby with a Terminator, this would be the result. Not as swift as Tacticus armor, it offers far more protection. Any Marine wearing Gravis armor is a walking tank. Perhaps not as heavy as a Terminator, but those are exceptionally rare and precious resource hungry. The Gravis armor is the answer to this role. Worn by heavy intercessors, inceptors, eradicators, apothecary biologi, Marneus Calgar, Iron Father Pharos, Tor Garadon, captains, no lieutenants actually, which is odd, and of course, my favourite Primaris squad of all, the aggressors. I mean, what's not to like? They got bolters or flamers, and 2 power fists each. Yummy. Chonky does not even come close. This armour reduces the effect of most standard line weaponry of other races, and provides a strong set of additional plating and servos that make the Marine a terror in close, and a pain in the neck to remove from any hard point or strategic location on which they sit. The last configuration is an oddity, the Omnis armour, a strange blend between the Gravis and Phobos, worn only by the Kangaroo Cannons, better known as the Suppressor Squads, with built-in jump packs and grav chutes for fantastic speed of repositioning. They do not have the durability of a Gravis set, nor the sound suppression of the Phobos as far as I can tell, so a bit of an odd duck really. But these suits permit the use of heavy weapon support to the Vanguard forces, so they were made to fit a very strange niche in the first instance. The strength of the Primaris armours, the Mark X, is that they are swiftly produced, interchangeable due to being modular, and support the new Marines par excellence. Primaris Marines are trained in the use of each configuration, permitting entire squads or even companies of Marines to change role and use at the drop of a drop pod. With their increased capabilities, weaponry and vehicles, the Primaris Marines are absolutely necessary to the survival of the embattled Imperium. Never before have things seemed so dark, so hopeless. The ancient terror of the Necrons awake and sweep away all before them. The Tyranids are a threat from another, if not all other galaxies, and they are here to eat every last thing in the Milky Way. The Cicatrix Maledictum yawns wide, permitting the forces of not just the traitor warbands and legions, nor just the infinite armies of the Chaos Gods to walk real space. No. The increased warp infection within the galaxy has permitted the continuous manifestation of demon princes and even the fallen Primarchs. Even with the return of the Avenging Sun and the first Primarch, the Lion, things look dire indeed, and the Primaris are needed as never before. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. Hit the like button, subscribe and share the video if you enjoyed the experience. Tip via super thanks if I have indeed earned your bounty. And thank you for your precious time. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.